Hello and welcome to Paul Talbot's Aquarium Adventures. Now this aquarium here, the owners work during the daytime, and this is an air-conditioned unit. So therefore, the temperature that they're seeing the corals or the aquarium at tends to go up to about sort of 28 degrees. Now 28 degrees is the maximum temperature that I want this aquarium to ever get to. But the problem is this unit is usually air conditioned when the owners are home, and the owners are usually home in the evening. It's quite reasonable to believe that this aquarium is getting above 28 degrees when the house is shut up in the middle of the day and the owners are at work. So it's really important to be aware of what temperature do you think your tank's actually getting to. Now the other thing is that there is a small fan here, but when I did arrive the fan was facing forward. A fan facing forward will do basically nothing to cool the aquarium, so you need to tilt the fan down, and the fan needs to be let's say agitating the surface in order to allow evaporative cooling. Other things that they could do is obviously add a chiller. A chiller would be the ultimate and best solution, and there is every chance that if adding a chiller that this aquarium will really fire, whereas this has had the odd coral issue. The other thing that can help too is by just going to your hardware store and just mounting a fan. If you mounted the fan there or clipped the fan on here, you've got a nice powerful fan that's going to blow across the surface. That's absolutely going to help, because evaporative cooling is quite valuable. And the other thing that's going to help too is by trying to make sure that this cabinet is ventilated as possible. So whether that means opening the cabinet when you're going out, or whether it means grabbing another couple of clip-on fans and clipping them onto the sump, because having some good surface agitation via fans in the sump is going to help cool the tank as well. So the benefit of the fans in the room is that they're not expensive to run, they're not expensive to acquire, and they are relatively effective. Basically the chiller is the ultimate answer, but using evaporative cooling is definitely another option, because you can't justify running your air conditioning all the time. But taking steps to ensure that your tank does sit closer to 25 degrees is extremely important. And the other thing that does concern me slightly is the amount of fluctuation this aquarium may get, because if it is shut up in the middle of the day and the tank's getting to 30 degrees, and then it cools off in the evening, and then the air conditioning comes on that evening, and the tank may easily drop to say 24 degrees, which is quite a fair bit of fluctuation as far as a coral reef aquarium is concerned. Now in regards to water flow in the aquarium, if you do the maths on the pumps that this aquarium's got, you really have to assume that the aquarium has plenty of water flow. But actually, and the amount of surface agitation that's here is wonderful. But when you actually look at the corals themselves, they are moving around, but really nowhere near as much as I'd actually like, and especially for the amount of flow that the aquarium actually does have. And one of the issues that can be a problem is countercurrents. So basically in this case we've got one that's basically jetting in that direction, so it's going that way, and then we've got one that's going this way. So this is just a small cube aquarium, so that one's sort of wanting to go that way, one's wanting to go that way, so they do effectively fight each other. So that one uses energy to create a certain amount of flow, and that one uses energy to create a certain amount of flow. In a perfect world, you have an aquarium with heaps and heaps of water flow in which you can have it on a timer. So that one, say, comes on for an hour, blows it in one direction, then maybe goes off, and that one goes on and changes the direction of the flow, because changing direction of flow on a reef tank is highly advisable, but it is not advisable if the amount of flow you got really just isn't enough in the first place. If you don't have enough, it's much better to work with the kinetic energy instead of against the kinetic energy. And what I mean by that is kinetic energy is where you use movement to create movement. So if this one here is pumping that way, and that one there is pumping that way, then the water in the aquarium gains momentum, so therefore it will actually use the movement to create more movement, and then all the energy is working with each other to give the aquarium heaps better water flow. In this particular circumstance, I'm not really happy with the amount of water flow. Now, one thing that we've got to be conscious of all the time is clownfish harassing corals, because clownfish don't actually have a symbiotic relationship with corals. They've got a symbiotic relationship with anemones, and when the clownfish go and play inside the anemone, it's a beneficial relationship to both the anemone and the clownfish. But that's not the case with the corals, because you can see there, that's a dead coral there that the clownfish were playing in, and they're very sharp shards. And when the clownfish are in the anemones and they're pushing the coral's flesh into these sharp shards, they do basically internally rupture the coral. So those sharp shards are there to allow the coral to contract, and then those shards do offer an amount of protection to fish that might try and nibble at or eat the coral. But then if the clownfish are in there and they keep on throwing their body weight around and internally rupturing or internally damaging the coral due to the behavior or the shenanigans of the clownfish, it can actually kill the coral. And in this particular aquarium, the clownfish have basically gone from one Euphyllia type species to another and damaged them, and quite potentially ended up killing them. Then they've moved on to new pieces, and this is the latest one that they've been playing in. So it's quite reasonable to believe that if they do keep playing in this coral, that this one may die, just like some of the other ones actually have. So the question is, what can you do about it? I don't really recommend putting an anemone in, though that would be a solution if the clownfish went into the anemone, because the anemone is likely to cause more trouble than they solve. So it may just be the case that these particular clownfish, if we're seeing a systematic destruction of corals, we may not be able to put that style of coral in with the clownfish, with these particular clownfish. So these corals are not likely to have a problem, the soft corals are not likely to have a problem, but the corals that do have a problem may not be able to be kept with these clownfish. So we may have to either remove these clownfish, and hopefully the next lot of clownfish don't do the same thing or don't put more clownfish in, or when selecting more corals for this aquarium, we may have to bear in mind which ones we've already had a problem with and avoid them in the future. So we've got an aquarium here where all in all it looks quite beautiful, but some of the corals really aren't doing well over a long period of time. How long has the tank been set up for now? So it's going to be going for about 8 months. So looking at the some of the bottles that I've just pulled out of his cupboard, Algae Fix really doesn't get used regularly and as shouldn't need to. Revive just gets used as required. He hasn't had a huge amount of success with Revive, so that would indicate that whatever the problem was that was causing the trouble that needs him to use Revive, that the trouble itself really hasn't been fixed, which is what we're basically looking at now. We do have a calcium supplement which gets added weekly. We do have a magnesium supplement that gets added weekly. We do have an alkalinity supplement that gets added weekly. So the solid structure of the coral is definitely getting looked after. We do also have some phosphate and nitrate remover, which is on a dosing pump. So we've also got a iodine supplement. So the iodine supplement will help to suppress bacterial infection in both the fish and the corals. But what this tank is really lacking is a vitamin, trace element and food nutrient mix. So something along the lines of Reef Energy A and B. That would be a perfect addition. It's not overly important, but if never added, it becomes very important. So even if this is dosed once or twice a week, just to ensure that you're getting amino acids, vitamins, and all your trace elements, which is really missing from this current mix of products that he's got.